And we're continuing with Charlie Hebdo. A man brandishing a knife and reportedly shouting Allahu Akbar was shot dead after entering a North Paris police station today. It comes on the one-year anniversary of the Charlie Hebdo jihadist attack. And as France struggles to balance its newfound security needs long-standing liberal traditions. I-24 News correspondent Uri Shapira reports.
The tricolor flag was removed Tuesday from the commemorative plaque showing the names of 11 of the victims of the Charlie Hebdo massacre 1 year ago. Ever since the horrific attack on the satirical magazine's headquarters, the values these colors represent, liberty, equality, fraternity, have been put to the test.
Ladies and gentlemen, you protect the French people. You also protect the way of life, their liberty. That way of life, that's what the terrorists wanted to attack.
January 7, 2016, the first anniversary of the attack, provided another sad reminder of how fragile the current situation in France is. A man was shot dead by the police after he tried to enter a police station while carrying a knife and a fake explosive belt. A year after the attack, France is still putting the pieces back together. Perhaps the reason for this traumatic reaction is the fact that the terrorists didn't just kill innocent people in the middle of the French capital, they also attacked and jeopardized one of France's important principles, freedom of speech. Charlie Hebdo was a controversial media outlet way before last year's attack. In 2011, its offices were vandalized after the paper published a special edition featuring Prophet Muhammad as a guest editor, but nothing prepared anyone for that Wednesday last year, when two brothers, Saeed and Sharif Kouachi, burst into the Charlie Hebdo offices and opened fire. Overnight, France became a country under severe threat, tension that only increased after the Paris attacks of November 13, which killed 130 people. The attack didn't put an end to Charlie Hebdo's sharp and sometimes even grotesque way of dealing with controversial issues, but it did raise the question of civil rights in France versus the needs of a better security. In May, the French lower house of parliament passed a contentious intelligence bill that expanded the government's ability to spy on phone and web communications.
A new step must be taken. The intelligence services must have the human, legal and technical means to undertake the surveillance operations that are necessary and proportionate.
A year after the attack at Charlie Hebdo, the words of former editor Sharp were written on the wall, perhaps a chilling reminder of the values he tried so determinedly to protect. "I'm not afraid of reprisals," he said in a 2012 interview, 3 years before the attack. "I'd rather die standing than live on my knees."
And with me right now here in the studio is Daniel Shek, former Israeli ambassador to France. Good evening. You know, we are seeing that it seems that, again, France is a target, obviously. 1 year after, France is still licking the wounds of just the Paris terror attacks that we experienced just a short while ago. And yet it seems that France is still struggling to find a real solution or struggling to understand the situation.
Well, of course, who better than us Israelis to understand that this is an ongoing fight? You don't, it's not one-off and you win, you lose, you lose. This is going to be part of life in France. And I think that, for example, you know, today's event, a year ago, I'm not sure this guy would have been shot when he entered the police station. Maybe they would have checked, maybe he's not quite normal, maybe he's not a real threat, and maybe it would have ended with victims. I think the awareness in France that this is becoming part of life has begun to settle. You can see it in the legislation, you can see it in law enforcement, you can see it in the number of security personnel on the streets, and you can feel it in the public debate, in the political discourse. It's there to stay.
I want to join to this conversation Christian Malade, our I-24 News international analyst in Paris. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining me.
Good evening, Lucy.
Christian, I want to ask you a personal question, and not from the analysis point of view, but from your point of view. As a citizen of France, how did you experience the last events and the last year in France?
Well, I would say that today, after the trauma has amplified after the failed terrorist attack of today you just developed. I think when I heard President Hollande and Prime Minister Valls this morning repeating that France is at war with the Islamic State and Muslim fundamentalists and Salafist cells which are spread all over the country, but the headlines of Charlie Hebdo is still very interesting. The killer is still on the road, yes, but it's terrible, Lucy, to realize that the government started taking the drastic steps expected by the population, not really after the Charlie Hebdo's terrorist attack a year ago, but especially after the latest terrorist attacks of last November the 13th. We never really drew the conclusions from the social riots 11 years ago in the Paris northern suburbs, where we had young Muslims, non-integrated, unemployed, which demonstrated violently. So let's put it again this way. Laxism prevailed everywhere with the various left-wing or right-wing governments in front of the rise of Muslim fundamentalism in this country.
Were there any measures that were taken by the government towards the migrants, let's say minority in France, by getting into these ghettos that we spoke about, ghettos, of course, not the real ghettos, to these neighborhoods, to these people, to approach to these people that felt that they're not part of the French society?
You know, Lucy, 1/10 of the French population is Muslim. We have 6 million Muslims in France. I have heard for many years promises which have not been held by the various governments, as I said, saying we are going to integrate these third-generation people coming from Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, former French colonies in North Africa. But nothing has been done. And as a result, we have this social explosion of people who have been recuperated by radical imams in the mosques in the country. And we get these terrible results. So now it's true that after a state of emergency, which has been one of the steps taken, the control of the frontiers, the security means which have been taken in the airport or in the railway station, it's true that the French have waken up to a new reality that Israel knows far better than we do in France.
Yes, definitely. Christian Malal, thank you very much for this. I want to ask you, Mr. Shek, you know, I want to try to compare it to a situation that we experienced this week here in Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave let's say, amount of money to the Israeli Arab population, a step that was not done for a long time, maybe by any other government. And then he takes a step back from it and says, no, there are some conditions to take this money. And then he says, no, I didn't mean that there are some conditions, but we will look into it. Oh, by the way, it's not 15, it's 10. Playing like that with a minority, with the mind, with the psychology, with the integration of a minority, with the way to make the minority feel that it is part of a society. Is this the correct way to make the minority feel that you are part of, like what is happening in France?
Certainly not. Although you have to note that there is a very big difference between the two situations. The Arab minority in Israel are not immigrants. They were here from the start. They were part of the State of Israel from its establishment. Whereas in France, it's an immigrant trend. Doesn't make it any easier, doesn't make it any better. I'm just saying that, in a sense, the obligation, quote unquote, that Israeli prime ministers, and it's unfair to blame only Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Yes, of course.
It's been going on for years and decades. The responsibility of Israeli governments towards the Arab Israeli citizens is, in a sense, far bigger and more natural and more an integral part of the life of Israel than it is for the French for the Muslim French towards the Muslims. But you need to take far-reaching steps in France, as you certainly do in Israel, and you cannot play around with it and condition it. You have to show a commitment, because if you want them to belong, if you want them to embrace the same values and the same things that you stand for, so that you will be able to say, listen, you're part of our society, you have to behave by our norms, you're not outcasts, then you have to be more determined than any of the Israeli governments.
Amazing, because who thought that France and Israel will be so close?
Well, we have many ties between the two societies, so here's another
so
one.
many situations, even in this. Daniel Shek, thank you very much for this. Thank you.